So what I'm going to do here is give you a little bit of a tour, a very, very quick tour of getting yourself oriented in Ableton Live and get you set up to put these pads in here for worship. A set is the working document in Ableton Live, just like in Microsoft Word, a .doc file or .docx might be the file. An Ableton Live set is the working document in Ableton Live. This is a set currently called Untitled, because it's a brand new set. I haven't done anything with it yet. Sets will be labeled .als after you're done saving it. That'll be the default file extension for Ableton Live sets. So over here on the top left side, we have a browser window, and this is how you're going to get around all of your tools that you'll use in Ableton Live. This is a bank of different sounds. If I go to drums, there's a bunch of different drums that I can go use to build drum kits and whatnot. Instruments, there's tons of different kinds of instruments, audio effects, tons of effects, etc., etc. So that's just all different things you can use to create music in Ableton Live. But what we're more interested in at the moment is this Places, which is going to allow us to browse around the computer and find files that we want to bring into Ableton Live. So if you want to hide that, you can hide it using this little arrow at the top left corner. That takes away the browser and turns it back on. So if it gets in your way and you want to spend, like once you pull all your files in, you don't want to necessarily go into the browser a bunch, you can just close that and get it out of your way. Similarly, down the bottom left-hand corner, there's another arrow that opens up the Info View window, and the Info View window allows you to mouse over things within Ableton Live, and it'll tell you what you're looking at. It'll tell you what you're mousing over. So if you want information on, say, this track over here, you just want to know what is this thing over here, you can mouse over it, and it says Track Title Bar down in the bottom left. It shows you what, and you can read a little bit about what it is you're looking at, which can be kind of helpful if you're just trying to get oriented in the program for the first time. Down here at the bottom, we have a clip window, and that window is, if you put an instrument there, if you put a sample there, if you put a clip of audio, if you put a MIDI track, any of that stuff, the information for that will show up down here, and we don't need it right this second, so I'm going to close it with this arrow down in the bottom right-hand corner. And then this is the way Live 9 opens up. It has 2 default MIDI tracks and 2 default audio tracks that just open up with every brand new set, and a couple of return tracks, which we're also not going to use right this moment. So I'm going to close the return tracks window. That also cleans things up just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to find this audio and we're going to bring it into Live. But first I want to explain a little bit about Live's 2 working modes, arrangement view and session view. If you look in the top right-hand corner, there are these horizontal bar and vertical bar icons, and these are actually the Ableton icons. This is what their software is all labeled with in merchandise and whatnot. Because one of the unique features of Live is that it gives you these 2 different working modes. The arrangement view, if I click on this button here, is a left-to-right linear. Time is moving from left to right, and it's a linear layout. So it's just like a lot of other digital audio workstations that you might have come across, whether it's Reason or Cubase or Logic or Pro Tools, any of those things. You'll see this kind of layout. But if we switch back to session view, what this allows you to do is actually store clips of MIDI information or audio information, and it could be anything. It could be whole songs, it could be drum sounds, it could be pad sounds, which is what we're going to use it for. And over here on the MIDI side, it can be instrument stuff that you've created yourself. It could be MIDI tracks that you import from elsewhere. It's extremely versatile. So what we're going to do is just use one of these audio tracks to create a bank of pads that we can use and trigger on the fly. So all we're going to need is one audio track. So I'm going to delete these 2 MIDI tracks and this 4th audio track by clicking on the name bar and then just hitting the delete key. And I'll do that again for this track, and then I'll do that for this second audio track. So we have a single audio track currently, and we have 12 scenes over here. I think the default is 8, but I already went and added some scenes back in. So we've got 12 scenes over here. Now what this is going to allow us to do is load the audio into each of these clip slots here, and then we can use these play buttons over here to play those clips. And we can either trigger these by clicking on the play buttons, or we can also map these to our keyboard so that we can play them with the press of a button on the keyboard. Or what I like to do in worship is use an external USB keyboard that you can just get at Walmart for like 20 bucks or something. It's just USB. And you pop all the buttons off of it, and then you just replace the buttons that you want to map to. And I can show you how to do that in another video. So what we're going to need to do now is find the audio that we want to drag into these slots here. And I have conveniently made a copy of our audio file and placed it on the desktop. So here's our audio pads copy. And if I open that up, I just right-clicked, or I clicked on my right arrow key on the keyboard, and that opened up that folder. We have all of our pads here. They're in alphabetical order, but I'm going to drag them over. And it's wanting to preview them for us, so just going to drop those right in. So there we have all of our pads now in these clip slots, or they're currently loading at the moment. Each of these pads is probably 4 to 6 minutes long, so it takes a minute for it to process the audio, but once it's done processing, it's good to go. So just to see what we've got in here, I'm going to double click on this A pad, and it's going to bring up a view of it down in the clip viewer. Okay, so here's the actual waveform of the audio that's in that. And as we can see down here at the bottom on the time code bar, it's about 7 minutes long. And let's give it a listen and see what this pad sounds like. So it's got some swelling guitars and some electronic-y sounding pads in it. And then down a half step is the A flat pad. And here's the B pad. I can actually also launch these clips by clicking on the play button on the clip itself. But I can also launch them over here with my scene buttons, scene launch buttons. Okay, so that's how you get those 12. I'm going to stop this with my Stop All Clips button here. Alternatively, you can use the space bar to stop clips. This time I'm just going to hit the space bar. And that also stops the clip. So one of the things you can do in Ableton is map buttons to keystrokes on your keyboard. So if I hit the key mapping button up here, you can see that a lot of stuff turns orange. And what that's going to allow me to do is map buttons on my keyboard to these buttons. Anything that turns orange can be mapped to something on the keyboard. So what I'm going to do is click on slot number 1, and then I'm going to click on the number 1 on my keyboard, and see a little 1 has appeared inside of that scene name window. And over here in my key mappings dialog, I get key 1 is mapped to the scene 1 launch button. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Go to 2 and click 2, go to 3 and click 3, 4 and click 4, 5 and click 5. And just to show some variety, I'm going to go to 6, and I think I'll map this one to, let's see, what is the D pad? So I'm actually going to click on this and hit D. So now the D button will launch that. And go to the E pad, and I'll launch that one with the E key. How about that? So you can really map them any way you want. So I'm going to exit key mapping mode. So now all I'm going to do is I'll hit, for instance, key number 1 on my keyboard. I'm going to press the button. I'm not going to do anything with the mouse. I'm just going to press the number 1 button on my keyboard. And you can see that pad launches. Now I'm going to hit number 2. Number 3. And then the ones that we mapped to number pads on the keyboard, or letter buttons, I'm going to hit D. There we go. And E. Okay. So spacebar to stop. That is one way to get your pads loaded and get them to launch at the touch of a button and all these different keys. Now, like I said, you can just get a USB keyboard and pop all the buttons off of it with like a knife or something, and then just put the buttons back in that you want to use. so that you can use it as a foot pedal. You can just step on it with your feet to trigger the buttons instead of having to reach over to a keyboard to launch those pads. That way you can do it by yourself. Or if you just want to have somebody do it, somebody else run the computer, you can have them press the correct button. Alternatively, another thing you can do this, which is kind of cool. You know what? Let me close some of these. This is the in-out window button. See, I'm cleaning up my my mixer window here a little bit. And mixer. Okay, so that cleans up things just a little bit for us. Another thing you can do, I'm going to insert a new scene by either clicking right-clicking and then hitting Insert Scene, or using the Command I feature in on a Mac. One of the things you can do is, if let's say I wanted to call this scene, I'm going to rename it. If you right-click, you can see there's a rename dialog, or you can hit Command R. I'm going to hit Command R and rename this. Let's say How He Loves. And I know that How He Loves is in the key of C, so one thing I can do is click on this C pad, hit Command C to copy it, or you can right-click on it and hit Copy. And then come down to this clip slot, right-click and hit Paste, or you can hit Command V and paste it. So now under How He Loves, which is in the key of C, I already have a C pad linked up to it, so it's automatically going to play it in that key. So if you call a song during worship, you say, hey, let's do How He Loves, it's already labeled with the correct key pad on it, so that the person who's running the computer for you doesn't have to stop and think, oh, what key is this song in? You can just have that set up in advance. If you want to know how to do clicks and metronomes and all that, I can show that on another video, and that can be helpful as well. But I think this would get you started in playing pads. There's also some ways to make the transitions between the pads a little bit smoother. Like right now, when you play one and then you play the next one, the previous one comes to a dead stop. And I have a little workaround that makes that transition a little smoother. So like when you hit D and then you switch to E, the transition is extremely abrupt. So if we don't want that to have that little bit of stop, there's a way to get around that. All right, anyway, I hope that all makes sense and gets you, pretty close to being able to make this really usable for you guys. And yeah, anyway, enjoy.